Welcome to Beer Christianity. My name's John T.
My name's Laura.
My name's Laura. I just didn't have my freaking microphone on. Guys, I'm trying to impress the Muslim on the show.
Podcast guy.
We're letting the faith down.
So this is how Christians are. Okay. All right. So disorganized.
We're sorry, Lord. Welcome to Beer Christianity. We're going to say that a bit later with our special guest, but I first wanted to tell you what's coming up in this episode because it was very, very cool. Guys, what did you think of our guest in this episode?
So
Laura.
nice. The most delightful man. And funny. He's great. 10 out of 10.
Would recommend.
Would recommend to a friend.
Real good at podcasting.
Really good at podcasting.
Yeah, man.
He's like,
He's just so cool. He's so funny. He's so nice. Look.
yeah, man. Just so rad. We are very much Team Ehab. He is the host of the Amreekies podcast, and he chatted to us about everything from like Palestine to being an Arab and a Muslim in America to growing up religious and having people try to convert you and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. Like, what was the highlight for you, Melky?
Oh man, that's tough. But just as you mentioned there, the evangelistic stuff I found fascinating. His attitude or his perspective from being evangelized, and also vice versa. That there's kind of that he would have thoughts and pressure from his background to convert as well. And I think that's just a very interesting place. It's very interesting to kind of, my tendency now is to go super postmodern and, each of our own truth and never mix, and there's no ultimate truth either. But how does that live alongside the fact that we do hold genuine differences, genuine beliefs, and, it's cool. Sometimes people convert also,
Laura, what about you? What's your favorite bit?
I loved hearing about his just friendship with Cameron from Ryan Hood, who's on a previous episode of the podcast. And just, man, I wish my non-Christian friends talked about me the way that Ehab talks about Cameron, because man, that's so lovely to hear. And and just interesting and fascinating how his faith has grown, and Ehab's faith has grown through his friendship with Cameron. Just wonderful to hear. Yeah,
that's very cool. And when we've been talking about the supra religious nature of God and the stuff we did with Martin Akkad, or it all kind of ties in. And thinking about your own witness as a Christian, go back and listen to the Ryan Hood episode, because that dude is apparently an excellent witness, and we could probably all learn from him. But also listen to this one, because Ehab is just so freaking cool and awesome. And while he doesn't want to necessarily be an ambassador for all of the different parts that make up his identity, he really is.
You can't help it.
He's such a good one. So anyway, just an absolute gem of a man who you can listen to the whole conversation with now. Hi, welcome to Beer Christianity. My name's John T.
I'm Laura.
And I'm Malky. Oh, I said and
Ehab.
for fuck's sake.
Hi, welcome to Beer Christianity. My name's John T.
I'm Laura.
I'm Malky.
And I'm Ehab Jalal.
Ehab, welcome to the podcast. It is so cool to have you here.
Thank you for having me.
It's just been delightful. We've been chatting with Ehab for now quite a long time. We decided, hey, we should start recording because people should hear this. It's great. If you are a long-time listener to the podcast, you will know that for a while now, we've been recommending a podcast called Amreekies, or The Amreekies. Is it The Amreekies? It's The Amreekies.
Yeah, it's called the Amreekies podcast to be like the full name.
The Amreekies podcast. And that is Ehab's podcast. Tell the listeners a little bit about what it is.
Sure. Thank you for allowing me to plug this podcast. It's the only reason I'm on here. So after I'm done with the plug, I'm out.
So see ya.
No, this has been such a treat for me to be able to meet you, I guess, virtually and talk about this. So as he mentioned, I'm Ehab. I'm from the Amreekies podcast. It is a podcast where Arab Americans talk about being Arab and American. The name itself is a mix between the Arabic way to say American, which is Amreeki, and the S at the end, which is English. So kind of like a mix between the Arabic and the English, which is how we describe ourselves.
Nice. And what kind of stuff do you generally talk about? And I think more importantly, who's your favorite co-host?
So my favorite co-host on my own podcast.
Yeah, on your own podcast. Oh, and on, actually, I'd like to know both. I'd like to know which
and then Jonty's going to go after you.
So we are three co-hosts total. I'm Palestinian American. My buddy Muhammad is I'm saying it in the English way so people can hear it instead of my own Muhammad. He's Iraqi American, and then we have Ala, or some people get her name confused with the Arabic way of saying God. So it's not Allah, it's just Ala. But when it's like written down, it looks like Allah, so I'm sure she gets like there's a lot of blasphemy that happens around her particular name, as you can imagine. And she's Libyan American. The subjects that we usually tackle are issues that we deal with as an American, as first generation Arab Americans, people who have parents that are immigrants, and the struggles that we had to go through and being able to navigate the world, coming from the background of our parents and integrating into a kind of new a culture that would be considered a foreign culture to our parents, but familiar to us. So you can imagine that there's a lot of conflict that could have happened for us growing up. And so we do talk about that. The three of us on the podcast are Muslim. So we often do talk about issues that come up that are related to Muslims. Although it is not a Muslim or an Islamic podcast, we try to make it as secular as we can, but that's definitely not possible, especially when for us, religion has been very much integrated into our lives. And so we're going to be talking about religion a lot. I don't know if you can relate to that at all on this podcast?
No. We never end up bringing God into freaking everything. Also, I love the idea of, the name becoming problematic, just because I met a dude called Jihad, and I was like, shit, you must have such a hassle coming into the airport at London every single time, because that's a rough name to come into an English country with.
So I was talking to a friend of mine. I don't know why this just suddenly came into my mind, but we wanted to come up with a name that we could own and reclaim the name of Jihad. So from now on, we would just call each other, "What's up, my jihadi?" And just like try to make it into our word.
Yes.
I have, which, becomes a little bit of a joke. I have an aunt, her name is Jihad. So Jihad is actually a name for both men and women in Arabic. Yeah. So that's actually really normal for us. The word itself, it doesn't carry any sort of connotations growing up. It literally means struggle, or to struggle in the name of God, whether that be an internal struggle or an external struggle. The implications of jihad on a global sense, especially since the war on terror has happened, is that it's very specific to like fighting against something, whereas it's actually it's a much more inclusive word. We are not threatened by that word at all. It's kind of like how you would use the word crusade. It's like we're, in a positive sense, but coming from Palestine, crusade has always been something scary. And so you can understand the implications of how words are used in different ways. And so I don't envy your friend named Jihad, or
just for the airport.
My many friends who are named Osama.
That's gonna be rough as well. Yeah. Okay, but we've actually helped our audience to know a little bit more about the word jihad, which I think is amazing and definitely is not the aim of this podcast. If you're listening to this podcast going, we're going to go head to head with Ehab and we're going to make him justify and explain Islam, that is literally not what we're going to do with this podcast.
I mean, in a way, that's kind of been my role since I was 14, since 9/11, is to present what Islam is and constantly defend myself and try to pretend that I'm the super citizen, hold the door a little bit longer for people when I'm standing next to, my sister or my mother who wears hijab, so they can say, oh, what courteous Muslims they are. And so like growing up, I really, really needed to constantly just try to affirm and prove that I am okay, like that I am a good person, that I am not a violent threat. And that is something that I had to do regularly. So if you want to talk about that for the rest of the podcast, I have plenty of material to try to demystify Islam and make it less scary to white people. So that's really just my approach overall.
Well,
when it comes to Islam or Palestine. So like we can also talk about
and we'll definitely be talking about that. I think that's the thing is you're experiencing, I think, what a lot of African Americans experience, where they have to go above and beyond to prove that they're nice and courteous and, fitting in with kind of white norms and contradicting racist white expectations. And then you have the additional mystery around and a negative image of the religion and the political dimension to that. As a 14-year-old,
sure,
how the hell did you even manage to navigate that a little bit?
So the thing about me at age 14 was that I had been in the United States for 2 months after having left the United States. So my childhood was in the United States up until age 9. And then from age 9 to 14, I was in Palestine, where I had the opportunity to learn about language, culture, religion, and the Palestinian identity. But what happened in 2000 was that the Palestinian uprising, the Intifada, happened. And so things had become a little bit more tense, more militarized. We would wake up and sleep to Israeli bombing and gunfire. And this is just like, it was a very war-torn situation. Definitely something that I, as an American child, did not grow up with and had to immediately get used to. And so I came to the United States fresh off the streets of Palestine. So I was already equipped with like a lot of information of like the Palestinian cause, being Muslim, and found myself immediately being the ambassador of all three of my identities, Arab, Muslim, and Palestinian, because of 9/11. I had to explain things in ways that people would understand, and I often could not really communicate that message. So as I mentioned before, there was a lot of me trying to just portray that we're okay, we're normal, we're just like everybody else on a regular basis. We're peace loving, we're just like you. Personally, like, yeah, I'm brown. I'm in Arizona. I could be confused with like somebody who's Hispanic. We're mostly Catholic, here. So I could mix in, but being around my mom and my sister who wore the hijab, that was like, then I had to take on that identity. And when I was in school, I also had to take on that identity. I remember just so much misinformation being given about Palestine, about Muslims, about Arabs through the news and through people. It was very alienating, I remember, and something that like I had to grow out of. And what I mean by that is as I became older and more rooted in my American identity and my Western identity, I started caring less. It's like, I am different and you are different, and that's okay. So I don't have to justify anything to you anymore. And I don't have to like present anything or defend anything anymore, because I'm more like secure, more established in who I am. I'd be more than happy to explain it to you, but if you choose not to receive it, then I'm not going to be bothered. And so what the best way to illustrate that for me was one of the most recent, shootings that was like in the name of Islam that happened in the United States. People asked me, what do you think about this? And I remember telling them, I don't have to. Like, I don't have to have an opinion about this. But for the longest time, I thought I had to have an opinion about it. I had to represent. And that was so much pressure for somebody like myself, especially a child, to be an ambassador. So much pressure, and it got too much. It's kind of traumatic, honestly, in a way.
Yeah, like that is definitely traumatic. And I think kind of traumatic. I think definitely that. But do you think that's kind of like leading into like what you're kind of doing with the podcast? Is the podcast, a cause of that, or is that trying to go against that kind of having to always represent?
So if you had asked any of us growing up, from like when we were children, if we considered ourselves American, I think the three of us would have said no. And because American and what comes up with that connotation is a non-Arab, a non-Muslim, everything that does not represent us. And a lot of times, if amongst each other, Arabs and Muslims in the United States who don't consider themselves American would if you said the word American, it's somebody who's white, somebody who's Christian, somebody who has a very particular type of ideology, and therefore it is not us. And it took us a while, I think into our 20s before we were able to integrate whatever our Arab Muslim identity into our American identity, to actually say I am American and that's okay, to actually see it as a term that would be inclusive of us. And that's actually, for me, there's a lot of societies and conferences and organizations in the United States that actively advocate for that. And for the first time, I saw myself in the American fabric. I am different. You're different. Everybody's different. And therefore, I belong. And it's okay. And so on the podcast, we are kind of at a late stage of that. And we're trying to reflect on our process to help other people who might be either in a confused place, or just helping them along by hearing our struggle. People can relate. People can not feel alone. People, we can serve as an experience that would be helpful towards other people to embracing who they are and feeling accepted, feeling like they belong. And that's a big part of that podcast. In addition to educating other people who may not be Arabs, Muslim, etc., of the overlaps that exist because due to us being American. So like, even though you might not be Muslim, you might not be Arab, you can still relate to us just based off of the Americanness. So I hope that answers your question, Laura, in regards to that.
I think that's fantastic. And I think that stuff does come across actually in the podcast. So if you're listening to this podcast and if you hear that, it's a kind of redundant thing to say, because obviously you're listening to this podcast. Otherwise you can't hear me say this. But if you are, you should really check out the Amreekies podcast, because it is excellent. Something that they do not do on the Amreekies podcast is ask each other what beer they're drinking. This is shocking, honestly, because I honestly think there's quite a lot that's quite similar between us, except you come across as much smarter than us.
Yeah.
And more together and focused.
Literally, I listened to an episode and I was like, these guys are so much better than we are.
Oh,
say this to me, and I was like, Laura, shut the fuck up. What is wrong with you?
I think
it's so cool. It's so funny. I'm like, oh man.
So I've also listened to episodes of your podcast, and I was like, oh my God, these guys have, their shit together. Like, I hope that I can. I hope that I can
and now
fit in
the veil
very
is
well.
lifted and you've seen behind
now that I see the truth behind
now you're feeling
all this.
a lot better about yourself.
No. I was actually really impressed by first of all, the number of episodes that you have, and secondly, the subject matter. And I'm like, these guys are like adults. They're talking about serious subjects. And so I'm flattered, Laura. Thank you so much for that. But you're right. We don't talk about beer. And to be honest, I was actually thinking about how I'm going to explain this to my Muslim audience, that I'm on a podcast called Beer Christianity. But guess what? I don't have to do that either. I don't have to explain it to anyone. I have actually, even though I do not drink, I've been to many bars and pubs growing up. Not growing up, sorry.
As a child.
Once I was grown, to meet up with friends and have social time, a social hour, and there was nothing wrong with it. But that me actually being in those positions and those clubs and bars and pubs would have definitely been suspect to my community growing up. Alcohol is a taboo, it's a stigma. But nonetheless, I'm actually really happy that I'm here. It feels very pub-like, and it's an opportunity for me to be able to connect with people, which is, from what I understand, the reason people drink in general, is to connect to people. And so, yeah, I was informed to. Not informed. I wanted to fit in with the rest of your episode, so I brought a drink. But so I can go first if you want to talk about what we're drinking.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you guys have kombucha in Europe.
We do.
Okay.
It's not as big, I don't think, but we do have it.
We have hipsters, so we have kombucha.
I figured. 10 years ago, I would not have known what kombucha is. I still kind of don't know what kombucha
I'm actually not sure what it is. Can anybody explain that? That'd be great.
I bought it from Nando's once. That's like literally my only experience.
I think it's a kind of tea, probiotic tea. No,
it's not fermented. That would make it alcohol.
It could be fermented. It could be. So there is alcoholic kombucha.
Oh.
But this one is not. And I think they have a little asterisk next to verified non-alcoholic, is that it has to be less than 0.5% or something like that to be considered like non-alcoholic, or no, actually 0.05. I don't know. I'm talking gibberish right now. But so I'm drinking a kombucha by the company Hum. It's not local or anything like that. I'm not that hipster, but this is one of my favorite, mango passion fruit. And I was telling the wonderful co-host of this podcast that I have a pint glass just so I can pretend to be one of you, which is honestly kind of what I've been doing my whole life, is trying to pretend to be one of you. So please accept me.
You are 100% accepted. If it's
Look what I have to do. Look what I have to do in order to be accepted, to pretend to drink on your podcast. No, but you guys are sweethearts. I appreciate it. But I'm interested to hear what kind of drinks are in your hands.
Yeah, Malky, what you on at the moment?
Here, let me see if I can get the opening of this.
Oh yeah.
Oh, that wasn't too.
That wasn't dramatic at all. That was kind of a letdown.
Yeah, sorry. Pop. There we go.
Malky, what you drinking?
So I'm gonna affirm your so-called gibberish because I'm drinking a non-alcoholic beer, Adnam's Ghost Ship, which is nice, but it's 0.5%, so it's technically low alcohol or whatever, below the threshold. I'm not going to get too wild, basically. I need to drink a lot.
Ghost Ship is really, really nice.
Yeah.
And there's an Adnam's shop in a town whose name escapes me, near Lowestoft, on the kind of east coast of England. And the town has... what is it called? Damn it, this would be a much more interesting story if I could tell people to go there. Oh, I'm panicking right now. I'm going to tell you that this little town has really great fish and chips, but I don't know the name of the town. But if you look for
where it is.
Just insert it in the aftermath. Just kind of be like, hey guys, by the way, I looked it up.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to Google it. So Jonty, quickly drop in. Future Jonty, tell everybody where it is.
Future Jonty here, telling you that it is called Aldborough, Aldeburgh, and the name of the fish and chips place is the Golden Galleon, and I did have to Google Aldborough. And in the same town, you can get Adnam's Ghost Ship from an Adnam's brewery shop, because I think they're based around there. So, go to Aldborough. It's beautiful. Has nice beer.
Thanks, Future Jonty. Great.
That was so seamless.
Yeah, beautiful.
And I was just starting to think, like, it was part of our thing that we really knew very little about beer and alcohol. But, like, accidentally, Jonty's, like, becoming all knowledgeable. But, hit and miss.
No, not so much. Not going to threaten any real beer podcasts anytime soon.
There's a lot of what we call barley water in the old country. In a dry city. By the way, I come from the city of Hebron, which is a biblical city, but majority Muslim. And in this particular case, a conservative reserved Muslim. So there's no beer or alcohol at all, but there's barley water. So which I never really liked. Non-alcoholic beer is just something that I don't think I would be able to partake in. It's just it's an acquired taste, and I have not acquired it.
It definitely is acquired. I think nobody starts off liking beer. I think that's also, I remember drinking quite a lot of beer in Beit Sahur, which is near Bethlehem, or is it part of Bethlehem?
That's right. You've been to the old country. I call it the old country.
I like it.
Just because, like, it makes white people feel a little bit more comfortable. I feel like saying the word Palestine is so, like, it has a weight to it. Yeah. And so I try to, like, kind of skirt around it, even though I'm a proud Palestinian. But yeah, you've been there. You've been to the West Bank, right?
Yeah.
And Israel proper, but not the Gaza Strip.
Not Gaza, no. But I've been to Ramallah and Hebron, where the Israeli settlers are genuinely insane, and we saw them, and they're terrifying and horrible. And and Bethlehem and Beit Sahur, and all very intense.
So did you drink Palestinian beer when you were there?
I did drink Palestinian beer.
How is it?
Russian vodka. And then got driven home in a taxi by a driver who I think was also drunk, who played Tom Jones really loudly.
Man, these foreigners, these foreigners and Westerners come to my country.
They corrupt your people.
I know. Just so bad.
Tom Jones, honestly.
But you didn't.
It was the taxi driver who liked Tom Jones. None of us were fans. It was so weird. Wait, the green grass of home, which is a particularly Welsh song, I think.
Wait, this beer is it Taybeh beer from Taybeh? Taybeh is one of the last remaining majority Christian Palestinian villages, and they have a brewery there called, like, Taybeh beer, which they make alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks, and they also have a winery there that make wine from my city, actually, from, like, the grapes of my city, which is ironic because like, it's a dry city. I went there, and the brewery was closed. And the way that this family had received us is they opened up the brewery for us too, just so we can, like, have a tour of it. There was so much amazing hospitality that I'm used to and I expect from my fellow Palestinians. But it's also just, like, it's really nice to see, like, that Christian Palestinian, like, culture as well, which for me, because I grew up in a majority Muslim city, I wasn't exposed to as much. So I would imagine that if you drank beer in Palestine, it would be there. Just for the Americans who are listening to this, that brewery was created by two Palestinian brothers who came to the US, learned the trade, and then followed their American dream in Palestine. Just FYI. But the irony behind it, and, let's get into just a little bit of politics. They are heavily restricted by the Israeli authorities on how they can export their beer. And so one of the biggest things that keeps them at bay from being able to expand is the Israeli policy. And so there's so much irony, and it would take so much time to deconstruct that.
Yeah.
But
once again, the economic stranglehold on the West Bank is actually one of the things we talk about least, and it is insane as well.
Yeah, I mean, this one has this. Sorry, I don't want to expand this for too much, but this one literally has all the hallmarks of what a Fox News listener would want to hear about: the American dream, a Christian trying to, like, expand their business, and Israel Palestine, and I wish this was more common. John T, what are you drinking?
I am drinking. So to fit with my manly exterior, I am drinking Copperberg Cider, which is basically like soda pop, but it is rhubarb flavored, which is a very traditional English dessert vegetable type thing. Side note: Laura grows some amazing rhubarb, and I made a superb rhubarb crumble this very summer.
I've had many rhubarb pies, and I do not know what rhubarb is for the life of me. So I know it's a fruit.
Like a stem.
It's the stem of a plant, and the leaves are poisonous.
The leaves are poisonous. You should not eat the leaves.
Which is terrifying. Because I'm like, how
It's
far
like
up the stem
potatoes
can I go?
though. Raw potatoes are
Yeah, but
poisonous.
a potato looks very. It's like a
it's not
gonad. You know
evil.
what I mean? Like the leaves kind of stick up from the. I'm doing a lot of hand
Snap
gestures.
the
This is
leaf
great
off
for the
of it.
podcast.
I think this is a
Yeah.
bigger deal than you think it is. It's
I'm
not that big of a
terrified
deal.
by this. Also, I finished that a long time ago. I'm now drinking a non-alcoholic beer, like you guys.
I also want to nip this toxic masculine thing in the bud. It is completely okay to like cider and a sugary drink when it comes to alcohol. Just FYI.
Oh, yeah. No, I mean,
It's
I'm
okay to like fruity Copperberg though.
Can we agree on that? Yeah.
I think the Copperberg is the real thing here because it is
not about
basically
cider.
crap. It's not about cider. I mean,
It's
I
so
currently.
sugary. It's like
Yeah.
90% sugar.
I mean, I'm wearing nail polish right now, and you know, my favorite drink for the longest time was amaretto. So, in terms of looking masculine, I think that shit's sailed.
No, it's all right. There's no honestly we have to broaden that acceptability of what is considered masculine. God knows that like I've had to do a considerable amount of that because the Arab masculine figure, the stereotypical one, is definitely not me. I'm way more emotional and sensitive than what you would expect, and I am so okay with that and so proud of that masculine part of me. So like it's perfectly okay. Laura, I've been seeing you drink something up and down the whole time.
I feel bad. You made such an effort
Constantly
to like drink a beer. All right, drink a beer coloured drink out of a pint glass while I'm literally drinking Jack Daniels and Coke out of a can.
It's the pre-mixed as well.
Pre-mixed. It's Jack and Coke tinny.
It's acceptable because
but not
it's
beneficial.
It's an American drink, so
it's an American drink. Yeah, that's the link. I recently was I've just got back from holiday in Edinburgh, and we went to the Scotch whiskey experience thing they have there, and I bought a bottle of whiskey from there, and like so many people have been like a load of people at the thing were like, oh, so like you into whiskey then? And I'm like, yeah, but you're not going to be happy about my answer. What I'm going to say. And they're like, oh no. So,
yeah, that's a hate crime in Scotland. Actually,
it's bad. But I do have some small bottles of Scotch that are behind me. So
very cool. Very cool.
Into one of them.
Wait, you're not going to mix them, are you?
No.
The Scottish guy was like, please do not commit this blasphemy. You know?
That is fair. Ehab, you have had a really interesting relationship with Christianity in that as a Muslim, you have spent quite a lot of time and quite a lot of intense connection with Christians. And I wonder if you could tell us just briefly about that, especially like your time in college and since then.
Sure. So in my childhood in the United States, I knew Christians to be the ones that made Jesus into God. Like this is all I knew about Christianity. And as Muslims, we're like, there's only one God and Jesus was a prophet. And this is how we differ. But generally, growing up, I interpreted Christianity as a monotheistic sister religion. In a sense that like there's so much overlap. We are educated to believe that Christianity and Judaism is part of the same tradition. We call Christians and Jews people of the book, and because it's Ahl al-Kitab, and sometimes even see them as predecessors because there's this emphasis on monotheism, on worshiping God, on righteousness, on doing good deeds, on accountability, the hereafter, et cetera, et cetera. There's so much in common between us. So largely with my Muslim upbringing, I was much more familiar with Christianity than most Christians were familiar with Islam. And so it never like caught me off guard or appeared as like weird or strange or different for me, other than, the differences that I already knew about. And so when I came to the United States for college, and my dad was trying to figure out like where to have me live, it was suggested to him that there was this Christian community house here in Tucson, Arizona, that could house me. Is that, and for me at the time, I was much better. I was a good Muslim boy, a much better Muslim than I am right now. And I'm like, yeah, of course. Like, let's live in with the Christians. Like, that's the safest place for me to be, away from all the partying and the drug use and the crazy stuff that happens in the freshman year of college. And for the Europeans, freshman year is first year of college, or what you guys call uni or university, the incorrect way. Nonetheless, my first year of uni, I was in a Christian community house, and it was amazing. It was great. It was quiet. There wasn't anything intense. I was able to focus on my studies. I felt at home. I felt comfortable. There was like Monday night dinners. There was prayer. I didn't feel like an outsider. I would pray with them and then just kind of substitute some words in my head, and we would have conversations and debates. And, I never really wanted to get into debates because why? There's no reason for it. But oftentimes it was a lot of, like, when they found out that I was Muslim and the only Muslim, there was a lot of, insecurity that would come up amongst the Christian residents of that Christian community house. And they would have this need to like try to convince me. And I'm like, you don't have to, bro. Like, it's fine. And so in addition to that, I was involved in the Muslim Students Association on a predominantly Christian campus, or like where Christianity, it's a state university, but the majority of people on that university would be Christian or identify as Christian. And so there was a lot of debate. There was a lot of conversations and discussion with people about like being a Muslim on campus. And there was often heavy discussion, and sometimes people who were very aggressive. So not only did it serve as a way of discussion, but it also served as a way of answering misconceptions and trying to really, try to give Muslims in Islam a more accurate, brighter, positive light in the middle of all that. And so oftentimes for me, the best way to do that would be just to focus on the commonalities. And a lot of times, when people are talking to you and you are considered a Muslim, most of what they're going to take away from you is how you interacted with them, is their impression of you. And so for me, talking to all these people, I was just trying to be like as calm and as nice as possible, but sometimes I would get insecure and start arguing and, not appear very great on that stage. And so there was a lot of familiarity, let's say, that I had with Christians on campus. There was a lot of, how do I say this? They would approach us on the false pretense, which is that they wanted to have us fill out a survey. And in the survey, they would ask us, do you believe that you're going to go to heaven? Do you believe your good deeds are going to get you to heaven? And then if we answered yes and yes, and they're like, would you be surprised if I told you that none of this would get you to heaven?
That is so sneaky.
I did those surveys.
Oh, you did that? It was you. Oh, no,
damn it! No.
Hey.
Crucify
This
him.
isn't my real accent.
It only took me the once and the two times for me to like get caught in that trap. But usually I would answer, it's like, well, no, I'm not surprised that you think that, because you think that the only way for me to go to heaven is to accept Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. And I think that, it's through God's, mercy, but it's also dependent on your deeds. And then I'd have like this huge, discussion in front of him. And I'm like, and then you say, and then I say, and then you say, so I'm kind of giving them a script. And I felt kind of a dick because by then, like, they were these young kids. And by then I was like a grad student and I was just being mean. Where after a while I was just kind of like, you know what? I'm not interested in taking your survey. So I didn't want to so there was that aspect. There was a time where I decided that I was going to do Bible study with this one guy who approached me. And he's like, oh, if you look in the Quran, we can find proof that Christianity is the way to go. I'm like, interesting. Take me down this road, good sir. And then he would kind of go and like focus and take things out of context. And I'm like, this doesn't seem right. And then after a while, he's like, well, shall we study the Bible? And I'm like, sure, why not? And I actually also took an Old Testament class, just so I know a little bit more. Never the New Testament, although I kind of regret that at this point. And at some point, it just became very obvious that he was trying to convert me, and I felt very uncomfortable. Anytime anybody tries to convert you and it's obvious, it's not a good feeling. I don't feel comfortable. I don't feel safe. And anytime I felt that, then I would not want to be their friend or continue to know them. But if it was a genuine discussion, that's something completely different. And so when I met my friend Cameron, who you hosted on this podcast, and that's how I got connected to you.
Cameron from Ryan Hood, if you want to go back through the catalog and find him.
Yes, Cameron Hood. He mentions my name in the podcast, and now I'm mentioning his name. So hi, Cameron.
I figured.
So he had actually never his interaction with Muslims was actually very limited. My interactions with Christians was extensive. And so again, I could speak his language and he couldn't speak mine, but we connected very, very quickly. And one thing I loved about Cameron, and I still do, he is a wonderful practicing Christian man who loves Jesus very, very much. And I have never once felt that he was trying to convert me. His way of preaching his method and his spirituality is through his actions. Is how he presents himself. And we did a podcast recording on our podcast on Amreekies, and I didn't know this, but apparently he was thinking about trying to convert me in the beginning. I've known him for about maybe 8-9 years now, but I think he quickly realized that this was not the way to go. And so he adjusted himself very quickly. And if I was to ever convert to another religion, it would be through Cameron, because I've seen such great manifestations of Jesus in his actions and how he's interacted with me. That spiritual, like he loves Jesus so much, and it's affected his spirituality and his compassion and his kindness, and you can see it. And that, it kind of gives me goosebumps a little bit as I'm talking about it, because it's also allowed me to really, really engage in this spiritual partnership with him. Like, we're really good friends. I've had like such great love for this man. And so this is again, like I never felt that he was trying to convert me, but he has influenced me nonetheless. Significantly. Like a lot of my spiritual practice, even as a Muslim, has been influenced by this Christian man. And in a way, like they are, like, again, Christians and Jews are the predecessors of Muslims. I feel like it's appropriate in some ways. And in fact, a lot of Muslim scholarship comes from Old, Testament and New Testament sources, as long as it doesn't contradict like the Quran, but it's not necessarily like 100% in conflict.
It's really interesting, even just at the start there, describing your understanding or approach to Christianity and Judaism is much more generous and kind than the other way around, than I would have grown up with Islam. It's the devil. Basically sure. Anything that's not Christianity, or certainly or evangelical Christianity.
So even any that's not evangelical.
Yeah, liberal Christianity is basically the Satan masquerading, and
I've heard that many times.
Describing your situation, moving into that house, I can picture it from the other side. Everyone's like, oh, there's this Muslim guy, and he's really engaged, and he's asking loads of questions, and we're all praying for him. But like the goal there,
I loved it when they prayed for me. I'm like, thank you. That's really nice. That's really nice of you.
But it's great what you described there, the journey, and then that interaction with Cameron. Like, imagine if we were actually curious. And as I say, like I was part of a Christian union, and we did those surveys. Not quite as deceptive as the one you described, but nevertheless, it's a tool just to get into conversation with people. But the assumption, a very basic and arrogant assumption that, well, we have it all correct and we need to, it's the truth, obviously. You know, as soon as people hear, they'll realize. And as soon as they hear our basic apologetic arguments. But
to be fair, Malky, I grew up in a Muslim like culture that even though we were a minority, we still had a similar upbringing. Like we have the truth. Poor, like deluded Christians and Jews, like, you know, if they only knew, you know, we can invite them in the correct way. And it's a very presumptuous, like from a top, like, hello, you know, it's very condescending also. It's like, let me tell you, you know, what's the best thing for you and your spiritual like understanding and your connection with God. So I just wanted to kind of add that.
Yeah. So did you bring any of that with you then into that? Were you thinking, you know, oh, I'll get these guys to mosque or
a tiny bit,
the end goal, or
I think when I was younger, definitely, because it was like one of the biggest honors you can have is to convert someone, is to get like a convert. And I actually had my own Canadian convert, like that was my friend that I was like quote unquote teaching. But ultimately what I found through the years is the best way for me to have supported this friend of mine is just to be a good person to that, you know. Oftentimes, and this is just me kind of knocking on my own community a little bit, when it comes to converts, we don't treat them very well, because we don't take the time to get to know them and find out what they need as humans. And so that human aspect is removed. And I was really excited to have my own convert, but even saying that, like my own convert, like it removes that humanity from getting to know that person, because we're all complicated, and converting is not really a thing, in my opinion. Like you can't just do abracadabra. If I was to become anything but a Muslim, I would need to study. I would need to like think about it. You can't come to me with your survey or with your like magic words and like all of a sudden I see the light. Would you really want me on your team? Would you really want to recruit? Would you want somebody?
Fuck yeah, you're cool.
I mean, no, that's not what I mean. Would you want somebody so easily recruited to be a Christian and represent Christianity? Like I would want somebody to be well learned, you know, well studied.
No, it's a miracle. We'll put you on the front of a book.
I was going to say.
We'll get you on stage.
You'll be on stage for the rest of your freaking life is what'll happen.
Yeah. But yeah, it sounds similar in terms of, they're not a real person. And I guess I grew up hearing stories of those new converts because it was like, oh, shiny thing. Let's put them on stage and tell their story. But you get a strange old view of the religious experience, the spiritual life, if it's constantly kind of winning a badge for your team, like, you know.
But can I say that I want to not defend, but at least come out a little bit on the side of the Muslims and the Christians who want to help the poor, deluded people from other religions, in that, especially when you're young, or if you are a newish convert, or if you're a convert as I am, like wasn't raised Christian or whatever, you discover something that you believe to be the truth and to be a better way of being or of seeing the world, or like for the evangelical convert, it's like, I've had my sins taken away. I've had a mystical spiritual experience of God. Like,
I want to share it.
You want to share it. And like when you love people, you want to share it. And like you're almost certainly going to be an asshole in how you do it. But like your motivations are not always tribal, you know, I think.
Right. Sometimes they are, as you know.
Oh yeah. No, it's like very often.
most often in my opinion. But I would say that, I'm going to also defend, because when I talked to Dave, the 80-year-old driver who drove me in Indiana to the airport, who tried to convert me while it was just me and him stuck in traffic for 3 hours. And he was like, hey, I wanted to tell you the good news. And he started telling me about Jesus. And what I saw in him was this genuine desire to help. And because he cares. And I told him that. I'm like, Dave, I know you care. And I'm so appreciative of this message, because I know that you care about me and my salvation and who I am. and just making sure that you want the best for me. And this for me is an act of love, and I'm going to interpret it that way. And so for somebody like Dave, and he was such a sweetheart, or a younger John T who was like, I want to share this great experience that I've been in, go for it. Like, I think though for myself, I was put under a lot of pressure to make sure that I invite as many people as possible to Islam because of this presumption that like I got it all correct. And I go back to my friend Cameron, who just said that you don't really have to say much. If people are interested in what you have, they'll come to you because you will show and manifest it in a way that's attractive to them. And so naturally to be like, where does this person get their good manners or their good behavior? And what's the origins of all this? And they'll see that and they're like, oh, tell me more. And I feel like this is the best way to recruit anybody into, I don't want to say an ideology, but I would just say recruit anybody into like sharing like experiences in a community, AKA joining. I don't even want to say joining religion or converting. It's just like, isn't that what the church was initially? Is just like a group of people who like were so affected together and wanted support from each other. Yeah. It's in the Muslim traditions, like the ummah is that it's like people who support each other on a regular basis. For it to have become tribal and team Muslim versus team Christian is where I feel that we kind of stop really focusing on the core of either religion.
Also, for Christian listeners, the Ummah is the community of Muslims around the world, right?
Correct. It's right? It's like the church. The church being like capital C church.
I actually find that like over the last few years, I've stopped arguing with people about religion because I feel like it turns them off so much, and it's too important to risk that. So now I only argue with them about music and politics. And I think that's fine. That's all right.
I mean, I find it much more interesting for me to complain about my own community and have them complain about their own community, and then we can bond on how this, on how disappointed we are and like our upbringing and our childhood traumas.
All dunk on our own religion. Yeah. This is how we create a huge brotherhood and sisterhood of humanity. I think that's beautiful.
It's just talking about how much we didn't like going to mass on Friday or Sunday respectively. Like
absolutely.
Yeah. So there's plenty of that to go around for sure.
I wanted to ask you a little bit about life in Palestine and what you wish Westerners, is that a word? Europeans and Americans, that kind of Anglo-Saxon world, and Christians as well.
I like the Anglo-Saxon world.
It is the Anglo-Saxon world. Sorry, Melky, and Celtic. It's fine.
I like to use the word white to make white people uncomfortable.
Yes, the white world.
The white world.
But yeah, I mean, I also think it's not fair because like to call all Europeans white and all Americans white.
So Condoleezza Rice's attitude to Palestine, not superb. So it's got that kind of,
I mean, I guess I've just become a little bit of a brat in regards to representing Palestine and Islam in front of white people, that I will walk up to random white people and go, and just kind of scare them a little bit. And then just saying things like Muhammad Durka Jihad, and
yes,
and then having them like having their jaws drop. And it's like, oh my God, and I'm like, it's okay. I will not kill you in the name of, Allah, but sometimes it's okay to laugh at ourselves. And sometimes it's okay to laugh with other people and kind of like dispel a little bit of that. Because even though as a kid, a lot of that really bothered me, a lot of those depictions, as an adult, I use those depictions like to my advantage in a sense of like lightening the mood, because here's the reality is that those depictions don't represent me. And so why would I be upset about them? It's a caricature that has nothing to do with me. And therefore I'm going to make fun of it as much as you're going to make fun of it.
And there's power in claiming that, and in satirizing that, and showing people how absolutely ridiculous that is.
Sure. And so that's what I mean by white people is, I guess, maybe, like, I don't want to say white people, let's say uninformed. And in America, I think a lot of white Americans are uninformed about Palestine and what Palestine is. But when it comes to Palestine, just like, my experience as an Arab and a Muslim, storytelling really is the best approach to things. And so we can talk about history. And you had a podcast where you invited esteemed Israeli scholar, professor, Ilan Pape. He's a Jewish Israeli scholar who really challenges a lot of the narratives and the propaganda that the Israeli state has put forward about the origins of Israel. And, by just questioning those things and challenging them with historical facts, inherently, he looks to be pro-Palestinian, just because I think the truth is often on the side of the oppressed. And this is kind of what happens. But so I'm not going to talk too much about history, but what I will talk about is, I think the biggest, if I wanted to just put one thing forward that I think anybody should know about Palestinians, is that we are a proud, resilient people who want justice, and we want to feel free in our homeland. We are people who have been displaced and oppressed in the land of Palestine by a state that does not represent us, and it is not created by us nor for us. And that state, the state of Israel, is in control of the Palestinians that live in the West Bank and Gaza Strip, who are not Israeli citizens, including myself, who have a Palestinian ID. So we, about 4.5 million of us, are not represented in the Israeli state. And even the Palestinians who live inside of Israel proper, who have Israeli citizenship, who enjoy more privileges because of that, and they're about 1 million to 1.5 million, almost 2 million at this point, those Palestinians are still not properly represented by an inherent ethno-Jewish state that's made for the benefit of the Jewish identity and the Zionist identity. So even though they are Israeli citizens and they have certain protections, there still is a lot of discrimination. And not to mention the about 10 million Palestinians in the diaspora, many of them still refugees in refugee camps because of because their ancestors, their grandparents were displaced by the Israeli state in 1948. They're still waiting to go back. And this is an issue of justice and human rights. And this is called the refugee question and the right of return. It's inherently unfair and unjust to have a system, a law of return, that allows anybody who claims Jewish ancestry to become a free Israeli citizen in the land and the state of Israel, while somebody like my friend who was born in Jerusalem in the 1930s is not allowed to go and live there back to his own homeland because he's not Jewish, and he's only able to go there as a tourist. The system is rigged to favor one side over the other. So as a Palestinian generally, I feel a sense of sadness that my people have gone through so much by the descendants of people who have gone through so much. I mean, we can go in so many different directions, but for me, it's just a tremendous amount of sadness. Whenever I go to Palestine, my own homeland, I have to go through Israeli borders. They tell me, welcome to Israel. I'm not afforded the same right of movement that a lot of Israelis are afforded. The roads in the West Bank are not called highways. They're called bypass roads because they're made to bypass Palestinian cities so that Israelis in like Israel proper are able to access the settlements in the West Bank. So a lot of times, even our towns and our cities are not even acknowledged to even exist were just kind of in the way because Israel didn't want to annex that particular land and include us in their state in 1967. There's a lot of history there. There's so much to say, John T. and the rest. And like, if there was one thing that I want them to think about and to know is that for us, we just want the ability to be recognized for who we are, to be represented by the government that controls, in the military that controls our lives on a daily basis. We want freedom, we want liberty, and we want justice. And I think all of that is fair. And these are all American ideals. And oftentimes I think that Americans are not really aware of how much, how antithetical the state of Israel is to American ideals, where people are not treated the same. It's not one citizen, one vote. It is a tiered system. And I am on the lower tier as a Palestinian in the state of Israel. So this is something that is also, I would imagine, and you can, and I heard you talk about this on the podcast with Professor Pape, is that it's antithetical to Christianity as well. There's so much to say. And like, this is such a difficult question for me. And it automatically, I don't know if you even sense my energy, like calm down, because there's so much to talk about here. But I can tell you that I grew up in Palestine feeling less than, feeling inherently defective, that I am a bad person, a violent person, that like I'm not affected by this aggressive military that exists, that for me to associate Jews with aggression because that's all I've experienced as a child is not like a normal human reaction, but rather it's because we educate our children to hate Jews because they're Jews. And I understand that there's traumas on the other side. I've had the opportunity to learn a lot about this growing up with Zionist and non-Zionist Jews, American Jews, etc. And I can understand the realities, the fears about security, the anti-Semitism that originates in Europe, the Holocaust, which was horrific, and I can appreciate all of that, even as a Palestinian.
It is just really heavy, and like
it is heavy. Like I can appreciate all of that, but at the end of the day, like me and my people, we end up we end up getting the short end of the stick, and they form their state at our expense, and we're supposed to be okay with it and just be like, yeah, like what peace means for them is for us to be erased. What peace means for us is, I don't know, equal rights for everyone. Like it's a very bizarre cognitive dissonance that I think often exists amongst people with a Zionist ideology. And so I've had to actually go through a lot in my adulthood, just doing away with thoughts of how I am inherently a bad person and how inherently like I'm a violent person. And this kind of ties into my Arab and Muslim identities as well. And I've had to really kind of dig deep into my childhood and see where all that stuff comes from and reiterate that I'm actually okay, that I'm inherently a lovable, good person, and that a lot of the trauma and the maybe problematic thoughts I had as a child came from very understandable sources. And it's not because like Muslims and Arabs all hate Jews that like I don't have to be so defensive all the time. And I've learned to appreciate my own culture and just talk about it as if we are normal, regular people that want to live, that want to love, that want to marry, that, want to be merry. And I can talk about this forever, John. You have to stop me before.
Well, we are unfortunately coming close to the time that we generally think people might actually listen to the whole podcast for. So, but I don't want to end on a down. I feel bad. I feel like I've kind of depressed you, and like we were having such a good time, and I feel pretty bad about that.
It's all right, because this is just kind of the reality of, and by the way, I want to mention that I have a lot of privilege personally. Like I'm an American citizen. I speak English. I come from a middle class family. Even in Palestine, I live relatively in a safer place than other people. My experiences do not represent the experiences of the Palestinian people, and I don't even think I can speak on their behalf. So I have it really good. But what I can do is I can tell my stories and then also tell their stories to the extent that I think I'm allowed to. I know it's not a comfortable situation, I think, for anybody, including myself, to talk about any of this. And I think a lot of Palestinians also don't want to talk about it because it's so hurtful and it's so painful. And you know what, Jonty, that's okay. You know, we can just be in that place. And I know that we don't want to end here, and we won't. Like, we're going to keep going, and we're going to keep telling our stories, and we're going to keep trying to represent our people, our ideologies, our background, I guess, in the best light possible. Yeah. And that's what I try to do on a day-to-day basis. And part of it is just to establish humanity. And that's what we've been, I think, doing this entire time.
Yeah.
On this podcast.
I really appreciate you being willing to talk about it, and because, I recognize it is really hard. And I think, for Christians listening to this, we have to do better. We have to speak out more. We have to work for justice for Palestine and for Palestinians, because we have been so much a part of the problem and a part of their oppression that we have an absolute moral duty to support what Palestine and Palestinians need, and to make that situation more just, and at the very least to stop contributing to the injustice. So I hear you on that. I also wanted to say, even though we are coming close to the end, Malky or Laura, do you have any questions?
I mean, it's not really a question, but I feel like just what you were saying then about the situation with Palestine, of just it being the absolute antithesis of Christianity. And I'm just like, we can get however caught up in the theology of it all if people want to, but looking at the reality that is in front of you, I just don't see how people can want to support that oppression. We as Christians are called to fight for the oppressed, and that is a very obvious situation that we should be fighting for. So I think that was
I don't know, but hopefully this comes out okay. But I just wanted to say that I have inherited a fair amount of issues and worked through issues of self-worth, self-acceptance, and that's from a real place of privilege. Just well done, man. Well done for I don't know, keeping going, getting to where you are, having such a positive outlook and processing things the way you have, to have such kind of trauma on trauma and then come back to the States age 14 and face those levels of Islamophobia and everything else on top.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'm still learning, and for me, even though I've been talking about the Palestinian struggle for a while, a big part of it was and remains listening to other people and learning from other people and having discussions on a regular basis, because sometimes even my own perceptions of things were a little bit off. So I think it's important to continue to be open-minded and continue to learn, even if you think that you know it all, like I do sometimes.
I don't relate to that at all, but yeah.
You don't sound like any other co-host to me. Damn, I meant host.
We're all talking about Laura, obviously. I'm assuming.
Obviously.
Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any final thoughts to share with us?
Good luck on editing. For starters. See, I'm just still thinking about things from a director's point of view. No, I'm very thankful for having me on and for your willingness to receive me and accept me. That's very valuable for me, especially as somebody who struggled with both of those things growing up. I feel very at home here and very comfortable among you. Even like from the first time that you and I first talked, Jonty, on the phone, I'm like, we could definitely like meet up at a pub and just go through all sorts of different subjects. So I'm very, very happy that we had this opportunity. I'm hoping it's not the last time.
Absolutely.
And would love to have all three of you on our podcast, the largest podcast ever. 6
The
people
biggest crossover.
talking about all sorts of different things. Man, I have a hard time when it's 4 people. I can't even imagine. But thank you for again receiving me, for listening. It's a lot of very difficult subjects that I'm continuing to learn about and process and analyze and work on. And I hope I did not say anything too offensive towards my own people, let alone towards yours.
Screw ours, it's fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
Where can people find the podcast? Point them to a website. Point them to anything you'd like to. Really.
So So you can find us by going to the Amreekies podcast. Amreekies is spelled AMREEKIES, the Amreekiespodcast.com. We're also on Instagram and Facebook, on Twitter. And we are a small podcast that recently celebrated their 40th episode. So we would love to have more listenership, and I will definitely be directing people towards your podcast as well. I think this is how you do it.
We're all going to be influencers soon. I'm certain of it. I'm going to be just doing TikTok dances. It's going to
the algorithms will be through the roof.
They will.
Exactly. Just like you can also find us on Stitcher, Apple Podcast, Spotify, all the major platforms. So the Amreekies podcast.
And you're also on Insta and all of that sort of stuff.
All the good socials, yeah.
All the good socials. Fantastic. You can also, if this is your first time listening to Beer Christianity, you can find us at beerchristianity.libsyn.com. It's not a good website. I'm so sorry. I'm just not very good at it. And you can find us on Spotify and all the same things as the Amreekies. And I'm assuming that, we're both going to be your favorite podcast from now on. So that's cool.
Most definitely. And I'm gonna start from episode 1 and submit my report of my impression of your podcast by this time next week. So
maybe don't start at episode 1. We get better.
Yeah.
It was even worse.
You have no idea.
I know exactly what you're talking about, so you're perfectly fine. Thanks, guys. I really appreciate your time.
Ehab, this has been a delight and a joy. Thank you.
All right, friends.
Awesome.
Be well.
Dude, be well. Bye.